Thank you for joining the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for our online worship service. I'm the Reverend Dr. Colin Bossen, and today I'm joined in worship by our Assistant Minister, D. Scott Cooper, our Membership and Communications Coordinator, Alma Viscara, our Director of Religious Community, Carol Burris, our Family Ministries Coordinator, Alex Kemig, and of course, our music director, Mark Vogel. We have a special treat for you today, the debut of our online choir. Mark is joined in singing the hymn De Noche by Kathy Kinson, Carolyn Leap, Doreen Lee, Noel McSherry, Jim McGee, and Carolyn Mueller. My sermon today is titled, How Can I Keep From Singing? And it starts off our month's reflection on the theme of perseverance. Today, I would like to extend a special greeting to all of you who are watching who are not part of our regular Sunday morning services. Since we have gone online, we've had people from all over the world who've been joining with us and viewing our programs. And so if you're in Detroit or Cleveland or Buenos Aires or Prague or Tokyo or even here in Houston but don't normally come to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, I'd like to invite you to drop us a line so that we can get to know you a bit better. Please take a moment, if you have a chance, to send us an email at ministers@firstuu.org. Again, that's ministers@firstuu.org. If you do, Reverend Scott or I will be happy to write you back. For those of you who are with us for the first time, let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. We are a religious tradition that celebrates the possibility of goodness within each human heart, the transformative power of love, and the clarifying force of reason. We believe we need not think alike to love alike. We hope that you find our worship to be a source of comfort and clarity. And we invite you to join us each week for as long as we remain primarily online, and in person as soon as it is safe for us to gather again. And now, I invite you to hear our call to worship.
You who have joined our community to spend this hour worshiping here with us, I bid you welcome. We have persevered through the month of April, but it has been written that the world's favorite season is the spring. All things seem possible in May. We come together in community because we believe in possibility. We have gathered in spirit, if not in body, and will join hearts, if not hands, and will raise our voices together across the miles. Come, you who have gathered. You are as welcome as the flowers in May. Come, let us worship together.
Before we light the chalice, we light a special candle of solidarity this morning. The Wampanoag, the people of the first light, were the first Native American nation the Pilgrims encountered in 1629 in what is now Massachusetts. Today, during the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims' arrival, the Mashpee Wampanoag face a new and powerful threat. The Trump administration plans to remove their tribal lands from federal trust, which could lead to the shutdown of their school and police force and even cost them their land. There will be a May 7th court hearing determining the fate of their land. Susan Frederick Gray, president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, has asked us that we join with other Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the country in support of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and reject the government's reprehensive actions. Please go to the uua.org to learn what you can do to take action. And now we light this candle in solidarity.
Celebremos Vamos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz. Come sing a song with me, come sing a song with me, come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me, come dream a dream with me, come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me, come walk in rain with me, come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me, come share a rose with me, come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Please join with me in the spirit that some call meditation and others call prayer. Make yourself comfortable, relax, take one deep breath, and then another. Open your mind, open your heart. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and mystery beyond all our naming, we come today with a mixture of emotions. We feel torn, we feel conflicted, we feel confused, we feel pulled in different directions. We are eager to move on from this time of isolation, this time of uncertainty, this time of mourning. And yet we know in our hearts, not yet. Some are encouraging us to return to a semblance of normalcy. Others are advising caution that it is not yet safe to return. Because of this, some feel pressured to return to work, torn between feeling vulnerable to illness and mounting bills. May local leaders find it in their hearts to use the funds provided to address the pandemic to help these vulnerable people with rent and utilities. Please grant us wisdom, grant us patience, allow us to persevere through this difficult time. Some have fallen ill, many are under severe economic uncertainty. Most are simply struggling to live within this new normal. May we not focus solely on what we have lost. May we remember to give thanks for those things that remain. May we support one another, even as we are open to accepting support from others. We pray in the names of all those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten. We pray in the names of all helpers of humankind. May the congregation, absent in body, though present in spirit, say Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We lift up Peggy Harvey as she begins treatment for breast cancer, and Charlie Burris's father, Sidney Burris, as he recovers from surgery. The families of the officers involved in the helicopter crash, and all those who are struggling with COVID-19. I invite you now to say the name or bring to mind those you wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection. This morning's offering will go to support the Community Projects Team COVID-19 Relief Fund. This is a unique ad hoc fund suggested by the Community Projects Team because of the pandemic. The Museum District Community Projects Team identified several nonprofit organizations who are established to administer assistance programs and with whom we have long-standing relationships. As you might imagine, their resources are being stretched thin because of the crisis. The names of the 5 organizations will be listed at the end of the service. There are 3 groups that supply food and 2 that supply medical and dental services. These are organizations that have long been helping those in need and are now attempting to expand services to meet an increased need during the pandemic. Now, while it's impossible to address all the needs currently in our communities, we thank the Community Projects team for identifying these 5 organizations who reflect our Unitarian Universalist values and who will stretch each dollar we donate to help those in need. We look to demonstrate the love of our faith community by our actions. And although we can't offer in-person service projects currently, we can give generously. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Waiting by Dorothy Dow. If you should walk in the park and not find me, or go in the marketplace and not see me, would you not search further? Does not your heart tell you I am somewhere? Go out on the long roads. I may be at the end of one. The sea to the ship, the river to the little boat, the cloud to the swallow. One for the other, always, and I for you, forever.
A reading from The Plague by Albert Camus. All I maintain is that on this earth there are pestilences and there are victims. And it's up to us, so far as is possible, not to join forces with the pestilences. That may sound simple to the point of childishness. I can't judge if it's simple, but I know it's true. You see, I've heard such quantities of arguments which very nearly turned my head and turned other people's heads enough to make them approve of murder. And I've come to realize all our troubles spring from our failure to use plain, clean-cut language. So I resolved always to speak and to act quite clearly, as this was the only way of setting myself on the right track. That's why I say there are pestilences and there are victims, no more than that. If by making this statement I too become a carrier of the plague germ, at least I don't do it willfully.
Solo la sed nos alumbra.
Our theme for worship this month is perseverance, and the title of my sermon is How Can I Keep from Singing? It's a nod to our closing hymn, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. Each verse of the hymn ends with the same question, how can I keep from singing? The question often comes after words juxtaposing the injustices of the world with promises of better days. The opening verse runs, My life flows on in endless song, above the earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? The hymn tells us that if we listen, we will hear strains of a new creation sounding above the earth's lamentations. It's a comforting message. It certainly reflects something that I would very much like to be true right now. Those old words from Julian of Norwich, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all matter of things shall be well. But the news of the hour has me mistrusting such theistic promises. Behind each set of words sits a divine deity who assures us, in the words of great poetry, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and reassures us in soaring rhetoric, truth crushed to the ground shall rise again. Now, I love those words, and I love that hymn. But right now, I don't find myself comforted by such hopeful narratives. I find myself straining to catch hints of the music ringing. And so, in this sermon, I do not want to offer you false hope, nor do I want to give you metaphysical reassurances that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manners of things shall be well. Instead, I want to follow the French philosopher Albert Camus' injunction to use plain, clean-cut language when discussing the pandemic and the horrors it has unleashed, and to avoid such hopeful and theistic metaphors. I'm going to offer you a humanist approach to the pursuit of justice. It's built around an observation about the impermanence of things. Cambia todo cambia. Cambia la superficial, cambia todo lo profundo, cambia el modo de pensar, cambio todo en este mundo, sang the Argentinian songwriter Mercedes Sosa. Everything changes. The superficial, the profound, the way we think, everything in the world changes, runs my hackneyed translation. Everything changes. This leads to two simple claims about the pursuit of justice. First, no victory is forever. Second, defeat is rarely permanent. No victory is forever. Defeat is rarely permanent. Such words lack the melodic comfort of hymns to the new creation. And my challenge, or perhaps it is our challenge, is how I can make such claims and yet still cling to the refrain of our closing hymn. How shall I keep from singing? Before I turn to a humanist pursuit of justice, though, I want to offer two contextual reflections. The first, discussion of Unitarian Universalism and religious pluralism. It could alternatively be thought of as a response to the query, Dr. Bossen, why are you talking about humanism in a church? The second, some observations about our political and economic moment. We might name that section a response to Marvin Gaye's question, what's going on? So, Dr. Bossen, why are you talking about humanism in a church? I offer this rhetorical question for all of you who are watching this video and are not members or regular attendees of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. And I know that there are a fair number of you. As I mentioned in my welcome, right now we have people who are watching these videos from all over. If this service is anything like previous online ones, we know that some of you are watching from Maine or Michigan or Minnesota. I even know of a family who has been joining us from Brazil and someone else who's been connecting with us from Prague. And so for all of you who are unfamiliar with Unitarian Universalism, let me hone in on one particular phrase we use each week in our welcome statement. We need not think alike to love alike. The words are attributed to the 16th century Transylvanian Unitarian bishop Francis David. He lived in Transylvania when it was then situated at the border between the Ottoman Empire and what people used to call Christendom, which is those lands in Europe that were ruled by princes and kings and monarchs who affiliated themselves with one kind of Christianity or another. Transylvania was at the time a religiously diverse community. There were Jews and Muslims and Protestant Christians and Catholics. The practice was then that people would more or less follow the religion of the local monarch. So if the king or queen was Catholic, then the people were expected to be Catholic. And if the monarch was Protestant, then the people were expected to be Protestant. Now, this created all sorts of problems. Frankly, it led to a lot of stupid wars. The advent of a new monarch brought with it the threat of a religious realignment. Crudely put, if the previous monarch was Protestant and the new one was Catholic, then everybody was supposed to switch religions to what it was that the new monarch believed. Now, faith is deeply held. And few people wanted to switch their religious views just because the palace had a new resident. And so this led to all sorts of horrible conflicts. In the United Kingdom, just to offer one example, Mary Tudor executed Protestants for their religious beliefs, and then when her sister, who succeeded her, Elizabeth I, became queen, she executed Catholics. Now, Francis David was a man of peace. He thought all of this religious conflict and persecution was ridiculous. At the time, the king in Transylvania was a man named John Sigismund, and like David, the king was a Unitarian. David had no idea what Sigismund's successor would be, though. And so he and the king's mother, Queen Isabella, got together and convinced John Sigismund that rather than making Unitarianism the state religion, he should pass a law proclaiming religious tolerance. It's called the Edict of Torda, and it's looked as the first law about religious tolerance in the European tradition. It reads in part, "Preachers everywhere are to preach the gospel according to their understanding of it. If the parish willingly receives it, well, but if not, let there be no compulsion on it to do so, since that would not ease any person's soul." Religious tolerance, the idea that each person's faith, their relationship to the divine is their own, gradually expanded in Unitarian Universalism to religious pluralism. If the preacher can preach the gospel according to their own understanding, then there's no reason why the parishioners should not have their own particular understandings of the gospel. The word gospel essentially means good news. And I use it here not to suggest a particularly Christian account of religion, but as a way of saying the gospel is the thing that you understand to be the most important about your relationship to the whirling dance of mass and light, the earthly mess of water and dirt that we call the cosmos, Gaia, or God, or the spark of human reason, or poetry, or love, or whatever name it is you want to give to the all of this that we are part and parcel of. Over time, this emphasis on religious tolerance led Unitarian Universalism to be somewhat unique among the Western religions. It became pluralistic. Its adherents came to understand that we need not think alike to love alike. And they realized that what the religious community did together was more important than what its individual members believed. At the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston and in other Unitarian Universalist communities, we celebrate people's abilities to uncover their own relationships with I'll just call it the light that filters green through the leaves of trees, the virus that is spreading among us, the lush blues of Henri Edmond Cross's canvas, the damn rent that is due at the beginning of the month, which is the beauty and the horror of the existence of life and at the same time to ask each other the question, how shall we live together? We're a community. We cannot all agree upon what we believe, but maybe, just maybe, as a community, we can figure out how to live together. We need not think alike to love alike. It is this hope, this gospel, that is the good news, if you will, of Unitarian Universalism. We need not think alike to love alike. Our embrace of pluralism is why we have humanists in our churches. Humanism is a worldly focused tradition. Its adherents argue that there is no transcendent force outside of human history, no God or divine force that is bending the arc of the moral universe. Anthony Pinn, a leading humanist, Unitarian Universalist, and actually the person I spoke with in my forum this week, suggests that humanists recognize we're dependent upon a world that doesn't bend to our will and doesn't prioritize the criteria of our well-being. We are the ones who make whatever meaning we find in the world, I would suggest, and we are the ones who will bring whatever justice there is to be found into it as well. Alongside humanists, we have people of a variety of religious perspectives who participate in the life of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. There are theists and Christians, Jews and pagans, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and even many atheists and agnostics. Some of our members hold on to multiple religious identities or even belong to multiple religious communities. For my part, I identify primarily with humanism, but find myself drawn to the symbolism and stories of both Gnostic Christianity and Jewish mysticism. This is probably due to the fact that I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist congregation as the child of a mother who had been raised Christian and as a father who had been the child of a father who had been born into a Jewish family. It is also rooted in an understanding that religious language is metaphorical. We use religious symbols to represent that which is greater than ourselves, the mess of words that I could not really render into anything that is the greater all this of which we are a part. Humanist philosophy, Gnostic Christian symbols, the resurrection of the living and the politics of the living, which I've called it for in the past, the mystical Jewish parables are all insufficient attempts to put into words that which cannot ultimately be spoken of. Why humanism in the church? What we do together is more important than what we believe. Why humanism in the church? We are a pluralistic tradition that invites us to draw upon many sources for our understandings of our relationship with the all that is. Why humanism in the church? We need not think alike to love alike. And now my second reflection, what's going on? The state of Texas started to reopen on Friday. I took a walk through my neighborhood. There was more traffic than there had been in weeks. There were people noisily sitting at bars and restaurants. Very few of them were wearing face masks. The day before, the state of Texas reported the second highest number of new cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began. The pandemic is far from contained. It's only getting started. And yet the governor and his allies want people to get back to work and to get the economy moving again. What's going on? In my home state of Michigan, the scenes from the state capitol were chilling. This week, men with rifles stormed the Capitol building, demanding the governor open the economy. One member of the state legislature tweeted, "Directly above me, men with rifles yelling at us. Some of my colleagues who own bulletproof vests are wearing them." That's right. Let that sink in for just a moment. Politicians in Michigan are wearing bulletproof vests for fear of getting shot while deliberating on legislation. What's going on? Oh, did I mention that the governor of the state of Texas is a white man? Or that the men with rifles who invaded Michigan's state capitol were all white men? Excuse me, I must have forgotten. There is, after all, a tendency in our culture to take whiteness as the unspoken norm. Imagine, for just a second what would have happened if a bunch of brown men and women had tried to storm the state capitol in Michigan with rifles? How would they have been treated? What's going on? The philosopher W.E. Du Bois once cheekily described whiteness this way: I am given to understand that whiteness is ownership of the earth forever and ever. Amen. And right now, once again, the consequences of this doctrine appear to be being laid bare. The white men with rifles and the governor of the state of Texas are trying to reassert their ownership, their control of a world while the viral pandemic rages. I don't think it's a coincidence that the plans and demands to reopen the economy came soon after it was revealed that the virus has disproportionately impacted communities of color. I do not think it is a coincidence that many of the people being forced to go back to work right now, and forced is the right term because if the businesses they work for reopen, then they are no longer eligible for unemployment insurance, are people of color. It is the logic of a system that has built generations of white wealth off the exploitation of people with brown and black bodies. Two illustrations from national politics. First, we have the president's decision to invoke the Defense Production Act to force meatpacking plants to remain open. Now, this move is accompanied by two refusals. The first is refusal to offer any national regulation on the safety standards that businesses are to follow during the pandemic. Instead, businesses are to employ whatever safety regime business managers and owners think best. Now, I hate to say it, but most business owners and managers do not have a particular interest in keeping employees safe. They might be kind-hearted and good people, but if they work for a publicly traded company, their primary obligation is to raise shareholder profits. That's the core logic of capitalism and of our market system. So in refusing to provide national safety regulations during this time of pandemic, the president is basically telling working people that they had better keep working and that they are at the mercy of their employers. The second refusal is the president's decision to not invoke the Defense Production Act to produce either personal protective equipment or ventilators. He's willing to invoke it to force people to work under unsafe conditions, but he's not willing to invoke it to make sufficient equipment to save people's lives. Perhaps I should mention that the vast majority of workers at meatpacking plants are migrants and people of color, white wealth being built upon the bodies of brown and black people. My second illustration from national politics comes from the efforts of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to block any significant emergency funding to state governments. This is an effort to bankrupt state governments and destroy many of the gains that working people have made over the last generations. If state governments are forced into bankruptcy, then they will not be able to pay unemployment benefits. They will not be able to honor the pensions of public workers. Should I mention here that unemployment disproportionately is impacting people of color? Or that the path for many people of color into what gets called the middle class has been through public service jobs? Or that has been the objective of Southern white supremacists since before the Civil War to weaken the federal government so that they have a greater ability to exploit black and brown bodies? What's going on? The President of the United States, the governor of the state of Texas, and the white men who invaded the Michigan state capitol believe that black and brown lives do not matter. What's going on? White wealth is once again being built off the bodies of brown and black people. What's going on? Maybe we should take out the old Marvin Gaye track. If you've got the vinyl, I highly recommend it. And listen to the words, "There's far too many of you dying. You know, we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today." What's going on? I may have offered too much of the political for those of you who turn to the service for just a bit of comfort and connection rather than what I might call clarity. However, I told you that I would be offering a humanist account of the pursuit of justice. And that pursuit is an earthly pursuit. It rejects the claim that we should only hope for heaven when we're dead. So let us now move to my humanist account of pursuit of justice. For justice is not best understood in the abstract. It is about the actual lives of actual living people. And right now, being real about justice means recognizing that the United States has long been a racialized order. And right now, it means listening to the words of Warren Buffett, the billionaire investor and so-called sage of Omaha. A few years ago, he said, "There's class warfare, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning." My humanist account of justice draws from these real dynamics. No victory is permanent. No defeat is rarely forever. Instead, there's a constant struggle between all the different communities in society. In a society that has historically been white supremacist, that struggle is partially between those who wish to proclaim that whiteness is the mastery of the earth forever and ever, amen, and those who have a more multiracial vision. And is also between those who wish to maximize profit and those who work so that they can simply provide for their families. It is a somewhat crude analysis, but it certainly seems to be borne out by the struggles of the hour. On the one hand, we have those who appear to be demanding that the lives of working people, particularly those with brown and black bodies, be sacrificed so that they can continue to make a profit and continue to be comfortable. And on the other, well, Friday was May Day, the international holiday celebrating workers' struggles for justice. It was marked by strikes and stickouts, that is, people calling in to work sick as a form of protest at many of the largest companies employing so-called essential workers, who in many cases are being treated as expendable workers. So on the other side, we have most working people. In the last several weeks, this dynamic has been emphasized as the wealth of the richest people in the country, Jeff Bezos comes particularly to mind, has been increasing at a dizzying rate. And at the same time, many working people are in a state of complete crisis. More people are out of work now than at any time since the Great Depression. And the solution is not, as the governor of the state of Texas would have it, to get back to work. It is to provide them, as many countries are doing around the world, with the necessary resources to safely shelter in place. But of course, that continued safely sheltering in place would impact the ability of the richest amongst us to continue to make unprecedented profits. No victory is permanent. Defeat is rarely forever. I offer this humanist account of the pursuit of justice as a way to remind you that almost all of the good things in life that we have, that have come to the majority of working people, have come through struggle. The New Deal is essentially what is under assault right now. It's under assault in McConnell's refusal to fund state governments, for through the Great Depression, the federal government offered spending to state governments as a way to support working people. But this funding, this support was not granted on high by the largesse of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The New Deal and Social Security and unemployment insurance and the right to organize unions and, well, the list goes on, came about because during the midst of the Great Depression, working people organized, went on strike, withheld rent, refused to participate in an economy that was not working for them. And then they put enormous pressure on politicians and business leaders to make sure that that economy would actually provide them with something. Unemployment, Social Security, workplace protections are all under threat right now. No victory is permanent. And defeat is rarely forever. Following the Civil War, there was an effort to build something like the New Deal. It was called Reconstruction. And it turned back the tide for a little while of white supremacy and actually built many of the important public institutions we have in this country, particularly the public school system. And at the same time, it offered both black and white people some of the protections and provisions that would again emerge during the New Deal and that were later won in the Civil Rights Movement. Those victories were worn away over the decades between the end of Reconstruction and the crisis of the Great Depression. Some of them were reasserted and emerged during the Progressive Era during World War I, but it was mostly World War II that provided an opportunity to rebuild and build upon them. And now, what's going on? Will the pandemic bring about further destruction of those gains? Or will folks organize to lay the groundwork for working people to have more of the good things of life? No victory is permanent. Defeat is rarely forever. I'm afraid that through this sermon, I may have focused too much on a narrative of social salvation for some of your tastes. Where is the song in all of this, you might be asking? You might not be an essential worker. You might be someone who has the resources to continue to shelter in place. You might hear your life reflected in the words of Dorothy Dow's poem, Waiting, written shortly after the flu pandemic in 1918. If you should go for a walk in the park and not find me, or go in the marketplace and not see me, would you not search further? Does your heart not tell you that I am somewhere? Go out on the long roads. I may be at the end of one of them. You might spend most of your time at home, like I do, trying to wait it out until it ends, and waiting and wanting a more hope-filled message than this one. If you are, I invite you to listen to me as we turn at the end of the sermon to a reflection on Albert Camus' novel, The Plague. It's a novel that I'm inviting you to read with me this month as part of my discussion group, Texts for Troubled Times. Camus' novel is set in an unspecified Algerian town immediately following World War II. The book centers on the question, in the midst of a pandemic, how shall we, as individuals, pursue justice? It's often read as a parable about life under totalitarianism, for Camus was a committed anti-fascist and had fought the Nazis as part of the French resistance. When he wrote the book, he was then very concerned about the rise of totalitarianism via the Soviet Union. He thought more about that than he did about plagues. But then he argued in his book that totalitarian regimes, those who organize around the politics of the dead and seek to marginalize the lives of working people for their own ends, are a lot like plagues. They come about slowly and then blossom in full force. They are endured, they are resisted, and then when the necessary immunity has been built up, they begin to go away. That, at least, is what Camus thought. In his novel, he offers advice on how we might live when no victory is permanent and defeat is rarely forever. He does not suggest that justice will reign enduringly, that the new creation will event and permanently be here. There are pestilences and there are victims, he tells us. Humans are not fully able to control the natural world. Plagues will come and go and come again. Tyrants and dictators might be restrained for a time, but they, like plagues, continue to reemerge and reassert themselves. That is what is happening now in this time of pandemic across the globe. How shall we live, then, Camus asks. By not joining forces with pestilences, he answers. By pursuing what I have called in other sermons the politics of the living, choosing through our individual actions the things we can do to slow the spread of the pandemics of COVID-19 and white supremacy. We should not act, Camus suggests, with the assurance that our actions will bring about an end to the plague. We should persist because we can, and because in doing so, we might make things better for ourselves and for everyone else. But such improvement is not guaranteed. Here in Greg Abbott's Texas, that means we can continue to practice social distancing. We can wear masks in public. We can be in solidarity with essential workers. Or if we are working, we can strike in demand for safe working conditions. It's clear that the federal government is not going to provide them to working people if people do not take actions, and that safe conditions will have to be won through struggle. We can boycott the big chains that are making money while small businesses starve. If you look online for alternative sources, you can find almost anything that Amazon sells. But most of all, we can ask ourselves a simple question. What can I do to not join forces with pestilences? That question may unexpectedly lead to another. Camus found joy in life. He sought to bring more beauty into the world through his novels and his plays. In his reading of Camus' novel, humanist Anthony Pinn suggests that its lesson is that there is joy in the struggle. He closes a recent reflection on Camus and COVID-19 with these words: "We struggle with our own task, working against the threat of this virus, simply because we can. COVID-19 someday will withdraw, and we will leave our homes again, gather with family and friends again. But the virus won't be gone. The threat is ever persistent. Things are well, not because the threat has been tamed, but because we persist. We should work to make life better, and in doing so, we imagine ourselves happy." We imagine ourselves happy. I close to my sermon with a gesture towards our closing hymn. I find greater truth in its ultimate verse than in its first. When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shamed are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? If we persist in our efforts to be in solidarity with each other and not cooperate with the virus, then we will be able to look back on these times without shame. If we persist in the struggle for justice, knowing that no victory is permanent and that defeat is rarely forever, we will be able to make tyrants tremble with the bells of freedoms. Tyrants might win, and they might not, but the peals of our liberty will cause them to quake. If we do what we can to slow the spread and to help, and dare I say, love each other, then we will look back on these strange days, these times, with the question, how can I keep from singing? I've spoken. You've heard. And as Francis David and I would both have you do, ask yourself, does this humanist gospel speak to your heart? How can I keep from singing? May the congregation, absent in body but present in spirit, say amen.
De noche, de noche, que para encontrar la fuente, solo la sed nos alumbra, solo la sed nos alumbra.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth, it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are ringing. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? As we close our service, I invite each of us to do what we can to make tyrants tremble, to slow the spread, to be in solidarity with each other, to choose the politics of the living, and to answer the question, how can I keep from singing? Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen.
While our church as buildings is closed, our church as people is still meeting, but now online. Carol and Alex are offering Zoom lessons for beginners to help you get started. There are weekly and monthly offerings to keep you connected and engaged with our community. 2 of our monthly groups are meeting this week, the First Monday Women's Book Club at 7 p.m. and the First Thursday Men's Group, also at 7. Please go to our website, firstuuhouston.org/online-group-meetings for more details.